So I guess we'll start the panel. Once again, my name is Chase. So I'm joined today by a couple of blockchain gaming stalwarts with several different kinds of projects going on for them at the moment. But today we're going to talk and discuss blockchain and gaming in general and what their thoughts about it are. Right. So before we begin, I guess I'd like everybody to at least self-introduce themselves and let us know what you guys been doing.
Sorry, we're sitting too far away.
Yes.
I'd like to close and. All right.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Ronnie from Gumi Asia. So I'm a mobile game publisher. So I'm based in Singapore. I have a team of about 150 people here and 90 more in Philippines, and then I do Japanese games publishing to worldwide. So some of my games that we did is like Final Fantasy Brave Exvius, Brave Frontier, and Alchemist Code. So how we got into this blockchain space is that we started a Gumi Cryptos fund of 30 million, and then we have our own blockchain project also. So we are here to share and learn from everyone. Thank you.
Hello. Hey guys, I'm Jeff Zirlin. I'm the growth lead of Axie Infinity. Axie Infinity is a game on the Ethereum blockchain. Actually, I think Chase mentioned it in his speech. Basically, Axies are fantasy creatures that you can breed, collect, battle, and even raise, similar to Tamagotchis. We raised around 1,000 ETH in our initial game asset offering. That went from February to April. We're currently rolling out our battle system. We had our alpha launched last night, actually, so I'm a little tired from being up all night. But yeah, you guys should check it out, and I'm super excited to be here today.
Thank you, Jeff.
My name is Shirley Lin. So I am with a blockchain project, I should say, called Doggy. Not dodgy.
All right. Doggy, right? Okay.
Yes, doggy. It means the discovery of game innovations. So we're building a platform to host crypto games, not just a hosting in terms of pre-sales, helping pre-sales. We have an angle to also help fundraising for the startup, as I think Ronnie talked about, and earlier Evan talked about as well. And we have an angle to also incubate these crypto game startups, because my own passion have always been helping with the startups. I'm based in San Francisco Bay Area. My previous 7 to 8 years have been very much in the mobile advertising space. So since December, this is my second blockchain startup. As a matter of fact, that I am totally deprived of sleep also, because we're launching our platform, if not today, tomorrow. The platform, we haven't even really got our white paper, but we are launching the platform and have a few games signing up with us. And it's under Doggy, D-O-G-I,
Remember that, guys?
Doggy.io. Yeah, you can check it out.
Thanks, Shirley.
Hi, everybody. My name is still Jared Psigoda.
It did not change, right?
No, it did not change since earlier. I actually slept fantastically last night. Bitcoin's up 10%, so...
He's already raising a bunch of tokens or Ethereums, right?
Yeah, we already raised our tokens, so it's nice when it goes up. But I'm the founder of BitGuild, which, as mentioned earlier, is a blockchain gaming platform and community. I've previously, as mentioned, I worked in gold farming for several years. I was actually on Activision Blizzard's blacklist. I could never go to their headquarters. And then following that, we founded a company called R2 Games, which was a free-to-play gaming publisher, which all of the things we talked about as being bad, we actually did that for 7 years ourselves too. So we've been on both sides.
All right. So now that you pretty much knew who the panelists are, I guess let's begin with, I guess, a few questions that not only do I have in mind, but I think everybody else has in mind in terms of why do we need games on the blockchain? I mean, if centralized games work just fine, why do we need them on the blockchain? Jared, you want to take it first?
We don't. No, I mean, as kind of mentioned earlier, again, I don't see blockchain games necessarily going and really stealing a bunch of market cap from console games or from broader-based MMORPGs or free-to-play. You know, I see blockchain games as being almost a new genre of games that might be attracted at a different type of audience, and it could potentially be new gamers. So, you know, this happened 10 years ago with free-to-play. If you would have said in 2007 that there was going to be millions and millions of 38 to 50-year-old women as a core gaming demographic who spends billions of dollars a year on games, nobody would have ever believed that to be possible. But you know, with games like Candy Crush, which were making $2–3 million a day, you know, it opened up to a new community of gamers. So I think blockchain games will be different. The players are going to be different. There's economic aspects involved with blockchain games. If there's not really economic aspects involved, then it kind of defeats the purpose. So I think it kind of being, it's going to be a new crowd of gamers and a new type of game.
Yeah, I totally agree. And,
Agree, Shirley? Yeah.
But I don't think it's going to be totally different demographics. I think there's a lot of overlapping with especially the mobile game, especially in the mobile game. I see blockchain games are very much evolving similar to the mobile gaming industry in the beginning. So there's a lot of overlapping. Of course, there are all kinds of challenges and obstacles in blockchain, but I don't think it's gonna completely replace console game or web game. There's a lot of good reasons for them to exist. However, blockchain, in the beginning right now, what we see is a lot of the casual game, very fragmented. You don't play for a long time. You can play it when you're riding on the bar, or I mean on the metro or something like that. So, but it's only gonna be growing because people who will be holding cryptocurrency, this population in the world will only be growing. So people need to get satisfaction from different gaming while they are holding the currency as well. So I'm extremely bullish about the growth of the entire blockchain gaming industry.
Yeah, I think there's an immense sense of satisfaction that comes with blockchain gaming when you actually know that you 100% own your game asset. So I actually was, I played World of Warcraft when I was quite young, around 2003, 2004, during the vanilla days.
And I was already old by then, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was actually in one of the top World of Warcraft guilds, and we pretty randomly, like in a very debatable situation, had our entire guild have their accounts banned, and you know, each one of us lost around $10,000 in in-game assets, right? And something like that would be, you know, quite impossible to do on the blockchain, right? Where, you know, if you have, there are also some problems that might like theoretically come up due to this, but once someone owns a token, the game developers cannot, you know, revoke that token from them. Yeah. I think there's also a lot of interesting stuff that can happen when you have an open backend. For example, all of the game rules and the rarities of the items are there for everyone to see. If we change something, then there will be an uproar because everything is opaque and everyone in our players would see. So I think that's also helped with the pre-sales where people can say, people will know that, hey, this item will be this rare for the entire longevity of the game, and that's why this makes this a compelling kind of investment opportunity for me. So I think that's also empowering the community, as well as the community developers, where if all the information is on the back end, a lot of our most useful tools have actually been built by our player base, and that actually takes a lot of the workload off of our core developers, and they can kind of focus on the gameplay.
So what you're saying is that what makes it more compelling for games to be on the blockchain is that the level of transparency that it provides versus, say, for example, a much more centralized game that you pretty much don't see anything, right?
Yeah, I definitely agree, right? Like there are a lot of problems with kind of closed backends, right? Yeah. And I think those problems apply to a lot of industries, and I think, you know, gaming is actually one of the more obvious applications of that principle.
Perfect.
Yeah, and then Ronnie? Another point that I see is that the power back to the players. We see the possibility to increase the freedom to collaborate. As we play games like WoW and many games, there are expert players, players who are game masters, players who are so good in their game. But within this situation here with blockchain in gaming, these people can be compensated for their mentorship, for their leadership. Actually, now there's something, a new model for them. And then also the freedom to create. Example, if I'm building a city, he's building a city, I can have a wedger with him and we can just transfer to each other. So we are not bounded by the game designer's rules. We could have our own way of playing. So it actually adds a bit more spice to the players, and the community find it more fun also as we engage.
Okay, so I guess like taking on that specific question that I asked firsthand, and you guys did mention about that audience that we have in the blockchain game, which is pretty much going to be different from the audience that we have right now on, you know, the centralized games that are on the market, like whether it's console or mobile. But the question is, who plays blockchain games at the moment? Who plays them?
People that own cryptocurrencies. So I mean, you know, we've talked about before that the first stage of blockchain gaming, the gamers are probably going to be people that already have or own cryptocurrencies. And the main reason is, if you want to go and tell your brother or your cousin to come play your cryptocurrency game, it's like, hey, so first you got to go to this exchange and you've got to verify your driver's license and you got to do this. That takes a couple days. Then you got to buy Bitcoin. But you can't actually buy the other coin that you need for the game on that exchange. So you've got to take your Bitcoin and send it to that exchange. And then from that exchange, you got to send it to your browser wallet. Oh, and don't ever lose your seed or else you're going to lose all of your money.
12
so, I mean,
words.
Yeah, 12 words or 24 words. Yeah, 12 words now for the most part. So for right now, I think the first application for blockchain games is the people that are going to be playing it are people that own cryptocurrencies and they want to figure out, you know, do something fun by actually using those currencies.
And do you guys ever see blockchain games going mainstream at some point in the
Absolutely.
future?
Absolutely.
The
It's
question is
just a
when.
matter. We've got to resolve the beginning of the funnel. So how you get somebody to own a cryptocurrency and use that in a game without going through 18 different steps where they could basically die at any point by forgetting a word.
Well, it's just like the mobile games, right? In the beginning of mobile games, the same thing. Nobody thinks that you use mobile phone to play games because you're supposed to use a mobile phone just to make a phone calls, right? And the mobile payment, PayPal, and all that kind of things got over that. So there are technical challenges that will be overcome and that will smooth the entry and smooth out the wrinkle and make the barrier much easiasier to cross over
Not
to play
just
the
technical, but user experience as well. Like
Right.
somebody's got to think from a non-block, like how do you just make all of that
Right.
easier?
So in other words, if I am not a blockchain person, I don't know anything about the blockchain, and I'm faced with 12, 13 different steps as to how I can go from point A to point B, quite likely I'm not going to go there. Quite likely I'm not even going to entertain the thought of playing a blockchain game, right?
Unless you can make money from it.
Unless I can make money from it,
Which
yes.
then you'd be incentivized to go and watch the video or read.
Isn't that exciting? Because in any of the traditional game, I'm even calling mobile games traditional game, right? Mobile games, console game, PC game, web game, all those kind of things. The players are typically, I'm sorry, suckers. They put the money in, but they never get it back, right? But blockchain is very different. The players do pay the money, you know, pre-sale, but they have a chance to actually have the ownership to grow with the game development team. The success of the team can be bound with their supporters and players because they all have a little stake in the game. So that's very unusual, and that's what I see helping the development team, crypto game development team, to grow into the next stage. And that's everybody's bounding to it.
And Jeff, you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with this idea that because your players are your stakeholders, they're also in some way your teammates, right? Like we've had, as I mentioned before, a lot of our most useful tools have been built by our community members. You know, our community members are also our best advocates. Some of them have even attended conferences and you know, run booths on our behalf when you know, we're not able to go there, right? Because they do have such a vested interest in spreading the game, making the game popular, that I guess the incentive mechanisms are really interesting. And what I've noticed is that our, you know, at least in our game, our player base, a lot of them are quite intellectual, and a lot of them are early cryptocurrency adopters and evangelists, and they really know how technology spreads and they've been able to give us a lot of advice. Actually, one of, I think, the innovations that we've added to the crypto gaming sphere is something called the Player Council, where we have a group of around 20 players who we ask them their advice on different features and how we should structure different economic incentives, because I think it's really super important to speak to your players, especially when they're your investors, right? Like, you need to keep them happy, because, first of all, they're your players, but then at the same time, right now, at least, when you're kind of not that far removed from your pre-sale stage, most of your players are also investors in your game. So I think, yeah, it brings up we have a really, like, the communities are small, but I think they're very tight-knit, and there are interesting relationships that are forming between the players and the devs that I don't think we've ever seen in other games.
Fair enough. And Ronnie, do you want to add anything to that?
Actually, I agree with Jeffrey. So in a way, it also drives a very strong retention because they have a stake into it. So the loop goes. So they stay, they play more, and they will likely more monetize along the way. And also, going mainstream is also on everyone. The more games that he made, the more success you make on your platform, it actually drives us towards into the future. Also, I saw this information from Worldwide Assets Exchange that there's a survey done on the millennial gamers. 5% of them actually invested into cryptocurrencies, and 55% of them have a adoption rate onto blockchain games. So if this sample information is what we see, what the millennials are, right, as we go into the future, not too much in the future, but let's say 1 year later, it could actually grow exponentially. And then regarding what you mentioned about you have a wallet 1 to 12 steps or whatever, 1 year later, 3 steps. It can be possible. Yes.
All right, I'll mark your word and get back to you 1 year from now and see if that's really what it is, right? But so you guys did mention that, okay, user experience, so to speak, is one of the biggest challenges in bringing games to the blockchain. Aside from user experience, what else are the other challenges that we are facing as far as bringing games over to the blockchain? Like whether it's on an economic standpoint or on a technical standpoint?
Again, I think the biggest is still the barrier of entry to purchase and use a cryptocurrency. But I mean, there's obviously, I think, 2 other things. Number one is the type of team and the level of development talent that is being put into the games. Like some of the most successful games right now, I mean, if you look at Ether Online or CryptoKitties, nobody really had great hopes for these games. They were more like, let's play around with some engineering and like see what this would be like, and then they kind of blew up. So right now we're kind of ramping up with the amount of resources, the types of teams that are getting involved in the space. And number 2 is, I mean, I'm sure everybody's aware here that for the most part, the infrastructure that is best for creating blockchain-based games is currently on the Ethereum network. The ERC20 token, essentially the ERC721 token, makes or break, like if you didn't have ERC721, it would be very difficult to create a blockchain-based game. And the Ethereum network is subject to high transaction fees. It's subject to very slow transaction times, especially over the past couple of weeks with the F-Coin voting, the business model that if you would have told me 2 months ago somebody was going to make a wash trade to mine business model, I wouldn't have believed it. But it actually has slowed down the entire Ethereum network to make it almost impossible for transactions to go through on games. So this is something that's either going to be resolved by Ethereum itself with sharding and future updates, or people are going to migrate to chains like EOS if they can fix their problems. Or this is one of the things that within this next 6 months, I believe is going to be resolved. The question is, who's going to be the one to resolve it and get the community to actually build on their platform?
But there will be multiple. Because it's a demand, right? Because everybody's so enthusiastic trying to do that. So all these technical challenges in terms of the latency of the transaction and also the gas fee, that will be all lowered. I personally know this crypto game companies who's doing Texas Hold'em, they cannot afford because their players want to pump in a lot of money, right? They need to get that money transaction going. So they have to develop the technology to greatly reduce the latency. And plus, they say, you know, they can process thousands in a minute or in a second, and also the gas fee is drastically reduced. I don't know how successful they're going to deliver that, but I already know several companies are doing that. So to me, like you said, you know, maybe in 6 months, all these are going to be greatly improved.
And I mean, like EOS right now, like EOS, the transactions per second is real. It's very fast, and it does not cost any gas fees. Unfortunately, they have a list of different problems, such as more complicated account systems with owner versus active accounts. You also cannot just create an EOS account. You have to go and buy RAM, which has been, it's like $20 to create an account now. So everything has a problem right now in terms of the base blockchain layer, and they've all got to resolve it over the next 3 to 6 months. Jeff?
I think the games, though, are in a stronger position, right? Like, we hold the cards, and if a chain wants to kind of court us and make it super easy, like, they can do that. Like, we'll import our smart contracts into a superior chain. Right now, like, you know, our devs have looked into it, and we believe that Ethereum is still the way to go. It has the greatest adoption, and there's some interesting sidechain solutions coming out. For example, we're working with the Loom network. They actually just announced their Plasma Cash implementation for ERC 721s. I believe Vitalik himself actually tweeted out about that. So, you know, I still right now, like, Ethereum, I think is the only game in town, and I think it's, yeah, the developers should be ready, right, to make sure that the platforms that they build and the games that they build are ready to use what the best solution at that time, right? But right now, you know, the players are still on the Ethereum network, and there are a lot of, I guess, like, other problems with other chains.
So you think that at some point in the future, Ethereum would probably still be the blockchain of choice for game developers on the blockchain?
So actually, Loom Network's Crypto Zombie tutorial for Solidity development has had around 200,000, I believe, independent developers on that platform. So I think, you know, it's hard to say whether we've passed the point of no return, but there's a potential that we have, right? And the thing about adoption, right, is it's not all based on meritocracy, right? Like, you learn that you know, the keyboard, the positioning of the buttons on a keyboard right now are not the most efficient kind of positioning theoretically, but, you know, that's how it was released, and that's kind of, you know, how it's remained. For also English, right? Like, English is the global language. It has a lot, it's pretty hard to learn. It has a lot of grammatical inconsistencies, yet it's still what's used, right? So adoption isn't necessarily about what's best. Sometimes random historical events and the way that, I guess, like, information flows through networks actually has a disproportionate kind of effect on the final outcome.
So you're saying that these two things, for example, the keyboard as an example and the English language as an example, has reached the point of no return, and hence adoption is already there. So Ethereum could be potentially, okay, all right. Are there any other blockchains apart from Ethereum or apart from EOS right now that are somewhat potentially going to take that specific helm of a gaming vertical blockchain? I've seen a couple wherein, all right, we do have high TPSs that will surely address the problem of how we can make more games or better games in the future. One thing I noticed is that you guys do agree, or do you guys agree that the progress of games on the blockchain is held back by the infrastructure where it's being built on?
Oh, it's also by the adoption, right? In the beginning, I mean, it's going to be casual, but I've known some developers are VR game AAA developers are now doing the crypto game. I'm sorry, this is again, VR games are not making money. So they're converting to, well, it's never going to be. Sorry, I'm very bearish on that. But they are converting to make. So crypto games, like we said, it's going to be more sophisticated. It's going to be mid-core, hardcore later on, and a whole lot more different. I mean, similar to the traditional games, that kind of satisfaction of the gameplay, the complexity. As long as we can improve the initial beginning of the UI, make the barrier easy, make it everybody's easier to get into.
I don't think the technology is holding us back. I mean, I think we complain about it a lot, But I mean, a game in general is nothing more than a set of rules. And game designers are very familiar with operating within a set of rules. So Ethereum has given us a set of rules that we can use to create a game. And that rule sets includes it costs money for a transaction and it takes a certain amount of time for a transaction to be processed. It's basically just those two things. And if you can't create a game concept around that, then you're probably not a fantastic game designer. The problem right now is that everything in this industry is new. So like, you know, sitting with developers and game designers, they're sitting around a table and, you know, every single idea that comes out of their head is essentially, this hasn't been done before, so we have to try it. Does it work? You know, they have to learn the new programming language. So I think it's just a matter of time. Like, again, getting back to free-to-play 10 years ago, if you took somebody from Activision or EA 10 or 15 years ago and you said they were the absolute worst people you could hire to design a free-to-play game because their brain did not operate in that fashion. So it's just a matter of time. It's still true. Like, still, like the worst. I mean, I as a player, I love Blizzard and Activision. I still play to this day. But I mean, it's just a different way of thinking, and we were scrubs back then. Like, we didn't have anything to hold us back from thinking that a virtual cow could be worth $50,000. So I think the technology is tough right now, but it's definitely not a determining factor.
But also, right? The game is not every piece of game need to be on the chain. Right? Transactions on the chain, but a lot of the complex gameplay, they don't need to go on the chain.
This is a big debate. You could make a blockchain game that's 100% centralized. You just put
Yeah.
your Ethereum in and nothing else is on the blockchain. Or you could be an idealist and everything. So these are all, there's so many like moral and hypothetical questions that game designers are thinking
But game
about right now.
developers are terrible QA.
The way that I think
Some,
of it,
yes.
The way that I think of it is that actually, yeah, a lot of the initial blockchain games, such as CryptoKitties, have kind of limited gameplay because the developers behind them were actually like blockchain purists, right? Like the breeding fee in CryptoKitties is 0.008 because they have a fully decentralized auto birthing system. I don't believe that people care like so much about how exactly their kitty is born as long as it's fair. And there are actually centralized ways to make sure that like the RNG of the kitty genetics are actually fair. For example, in Axie Infinity, we have a similar breeding system. Our breeding fee is actually only 0.002 right now because we use a third-party solution called Oraclize, right? So I think game developers really need to be careful about what they decide to decentralize and what they need to decide to actually make really fun, right? Like, I think a lot of the limitation is that the blockchain games so far, like that have been released, are not fun, and a fun game takes more than a couple of months to develop. So I think actually, like there are some real games launching this summer. I mean, I mentioned earlier that the battle for our alpha system, for our battle system just launched last night, and I think it's on a level like that as a player, right? Like I was a CryptoKitty player, an influencer within the crypto gaming space, and that's why I ended up joining Axie Infinity, right? So as from a player perspective, it's something that I haven't really seen before. So I think, yeah, I think a lot of the legitimate games are going on the blockchain are going to start releasing fun gameplay, and yeah, I don't buy the excuse that, oh, the Ethereum network is limiting us. I think that's just an excuse made by uncreative devs who just aren't smart enough to work with the rules, as Jared mentioned, that are currently laid out.
So in other words, well, I think one of the gripes of game developers, the people at least that I've spoken with, as far as like their issue with Ethereum or with any other blockchain, for example, why they say it's limiting them is because of how much of advancement we've had on centralized games versus how we think blockchain game is right now, right? And obviously on centralized games, it's a little bit different. The rule sets are different, and how you build your games on as a centralized game is really different as well. I mean, I think that specific mindset, that paradigm shift hasn't moved over to blockchain-based games yet, and so they still compare it as if whatever works on a centralized game, I hope to see something very, very similar that's also on the blockchain.
I think what we are seeing now is like a repeat in history. It's like back then, about 6 to 8 years ago, when I was at the beginning of this mobile publishing, we are all looking at freemium games. Oh, it has to be a battle card game during that period. So the ideas, the concept that they mentioned is very primitive. They only think of one idea. But later, as we evolve, role-playing games, better story, better game loops comes about. Then as for technology, which they mentioned, whether is it fast or slow, it's only an issue of time. And with today's technology, this time will even shorten. But there's one area that I need to touch on, which is even with the advancement and the solutions coming in to solve all these issues, how do the game developers reach their consumers? So we may not need a publisher, or we may need a publisher, but the channels in marketing, how you target, how you get the users to come to your game, that will evolve. Even I myself, I'm evaluating what's the future of what is called publishing in blockchain. I have to redefine this statement as it evolves through the industry.
Great. Really wonderful insights here. We're running out of time. We just have one more room for one question. And I guess that question is something very rudimentary in the sense that, what is the most interesting blockchain game, aside from the game that you've developed or you're working on? What blockchain games have you encountered that you think is probably one of the best at the moment?
It's not many selections. There's not many choices to choose from. There's like 10 total.
So in other words, we're dealing with the lesser of all evils right there.
We're all talking about a lot of different games, except him. He, of course, is going to speak for his own game, but we're all doing some kind of platform.
Well, actually,
so we love all the games, right?
Yeah, actually,
well, that's true, though.
I tried a spell of Genesis, earlier version where they use big crystals for their in-game. I think it's a skill game. The engagement is quite okay, but it's still a beginning. Then of course CryptoKitties, yes. Then later there's an evolution like Adamon, so they added a bit of battle mechanics. So I think it's still evolving. If you say, is it a best, I think it's still hard to put that term like what's best. But I think there's, how to say, the best is yet to come. I'll rather term it this way. And also I played his game, it's pretty cool also. So maybe he's maybe the best will yet to come.
There you go. All right. So I guess like, okay, because Jared, Shirley, you guys are working on platforms.
Right.
I want to ask, how do game developers, what's your strategy, or it doesn't necessarily have to be your secret strategy, but what is the best strategy to onboard game developers from developing free-to-play games or these regular games and move them over to blockchain-based games?
Right now, a lot of it's thought leadership. I mean, like, a great deal of our time, you know, as founders should very much be at game conferences rather than blockchain conferences. Because game developers are fascinated, you know, especially we talked about earlier with, you know, Tencent, NetEase having 85% market cap. You know, game developers are looking for something new and interesting and fun that they can be on the forefront of rather than on the long tail of behind the giants. So, I mean, it's just a matter of, you know, we've got to build these things ourselves and so that we can have successful examples of, like, here's an example of a successful game. This is what went well. This is what didn't go well. So I think it's just, you know, the killer dApp needs to be built. So everybody should be focused on that. And number two is just spreading the thought leadership within the game development community.
Yeah, and for me, it's depending on the region, okay? In China or in US, game developers are like totally want to jump on it, a lot of them. But I went to Europe to talk with them, and in Europe, a lot of the game developers are extremely skeptical, and they're really suspicious. Oh, it's blockchain, it's all scamming. I literally have to stand on the stage and yelling at them to get on this. But however, as a platform, we don't build a lot of the tools, but I know many companies, blockchain purists, are building various tools, for example, to work with the Unity, right, to build a smart contract, to get the wallet, whatever, so that the game developers don't have to invent the wheels and make them their job easier so that they can focus on building the gameplay and using these tools, Legos, to build the entire infrastructure. I think that will actually make their job much easier. And as a platform, I would love to work, you know, with the tools developers so that we can offer to the game developers.
I just wanted to add real quick back to your previous question about what's the most interesting game. There's a website you can go to called exitscam.me, exitscam.me. And so, like, we have like this thing where we don't know if we call it a game or not, but this game is the result of if you told a game designer leave your morality and ethics and laws at the door and just go free. The game is basically you put your money into the game and there's a jackpot and it says the last person to put money into the game takes all of the jackpot away. And every time somebody puts money in, it resets a clock, and it's been going on. It's almost like at 1,000 Ethereum today. Like, these are horrible, horrible projects. But if you want to talk about
Did you play it?
I did play it. I did play it, and I made money off of it, believe it or not. But I mean, if you want to talk about interesting, it was pretty funny.
Disclaimer, this is not financial advice. Proceed at your own risk.
Scam is in the name of the game, so you can kind of think about what it is. It's kind of a joke of the ICO economy.
Yeah, there's
The referral link is called bad advice.
And the referral link is called bad advice.
We all know about it, I guess.
but there's definitely a sense of satisfaction of the blockchain gaming players, right? They are the owners. Therefore, by the time they log on to the game, they're looking at every game's tokens, various tokens they have. So it's really a sense almost like looking at the stocks that they own, the portfolio, right? I own the token of your game, and every day I check in how much value I increase. I'm not encouraging you to do that gambling, but it is a satisfaction, a different gamification satisfaction coming out of that.
Yes.
I think actually, so what I've seen, so I'm actually not a person early to crypto actually. So I've actually been kind of a crypto skeptic, and actually gaming was one of the first interesting applications other than money transfers that kind of made things click for me, right? So I came into this space with a healthy dose of skepticism. And I think actually the environment in the blockchain gaming space also mirrors a lot of what happened with the ICOs of this current year, right? Where people were buying tokens and devs were getting rich. And you know, devs oftentimes, you know, like they made so much money that there was no real incentive for them to do anything, right? So I think actually like a lot of the early blockchain games are similar to these early ICOs, where actually the success of their pre-sale was actually kind of bad for the space. The ease of raising money was bad for the space.
Made them complacent.
For example, like there are companies like there are games like Ethercraft. If you look that up, they raised 800 ETH, and they haven't tweeted or said anything in their Discord, you know, for months, right? So I think what's happened with the blockchain gaming space is kind of also parallel or similar to what's happening with the ICOs. But I think that you know, now that the initial hype, hopefully, you know, now that people have been scammed once, it's going to be harder for them to get scammed again.
I'm not sure about that though, but go ahead.
I mean, it's true. I've actually seen some games, they've, you know, done a pre-sale, the game failed, and then they'd launch another pre-sale, and the same people will buy into that pre-sale again. I really don't understand, but I think like all it takes is one game to show that you can actually make a fun game on the blockchain, and that's actually the best way to make to make money long term, is to actually make an amazing game that people want to play, and that's better than making 600 ETH in, you know, a couple of months, right? Like being able to actually build that game, that killer DApp, as Jared mentioned, like that's what people should be focusing on, and I'm kind of glad actually that not that many people are focused on it. So it'll allow, you know, there's not that much competition right now for the legitimate projects.
Perfect. All right, that's all the time we have. I'm going to open the floor for questions. Does anybody here have a question for our panelists?
There's one.
There is one. Yes.
Yeah, I actually have a burning question for every panelist.
Burning question for everybody.
Burning question. Let me go to you and like give you the mic.
Yeah, thank you so much.
We have burning answers for
Yeah,
you.
burning questions. Okay,
Ouch.
I think Jared mentioned a very good point, which is the 18 steps for regular customers to join the game. I think as early movers of these industries, we sort of have this educational burden or educational cost that we have to teach our users that how do you install MetaMask, how do you get your first Ethereum to join our game. So, but as a game developer and as a game publishers, we all have this problem is we need users, right? User acquisition is one of the biggest things that we are facing every day. As I look through the ranking of the D apps right now, most of the daily volumes for Ethereum game might be 10s or 20s or maybe less than 100, which is so small as compared to traditional games. So the burning question for me is, how do you guys think that we should do user acquisitions? What are the key points that we should do, and what are the key points that we should give to our customers, give to our players that they have to, how do you say, they value, what's the things that they value for the marketing process? Yeah, and what do you think about the best practice of doing user acquisitions? Yeah.
So I can say with fairly a good amount of certainty that traditional game marketing practices do not work very well for blockchain. Number one, anything related to blockchain or ICO means that you're targeting a demographic that is immediately wanting to spend a lot of money, which means it's very expensive to market to them. And if you want to link that with the people who also have MetaMask, and this is just, it's almost impossible. So jumping out of blockchain gaming, we actually have to think about, you know, the way cryptocurrency works as a whole. One of the most important aspects of blockchain and cryptocurrencies in general is not just the technology, but the incentive mechanism. And again, going back to Fcoin, which moralistically speaking, I have issues with the design of the platform, but they did not spend money on traditional user acquisition, and they evolved into what is one of the top exchanges in the world in about 3 weeks' time. And the way they did that was because they had an incentive mechanism that was pretty damn enticing for early users of the platform. So it's not just about accepting cryptocurrency into a game and giving them a blockchain-based item, but it's how do you have some type of a mining algorithm integrated in the gameplay where the earlier you are as a player playing the game, you're able to attain an item or a currency that is going to have some type of value in the future. So it's actually about you know, the tokenomics, I think, is, and you know, the way you design your token, I would much rather give tokens away than spend it on Google or Facebook advertising.
Yeah. So do you guys think that airdropping is a more efficient way of user acquisition?
There's been some good examples of it. I mean, you know, the whole EOS ecosystem now is built around airdropping tokens, and you airdrop a token, the project's not online, and it's worth $100 million. But it's a matter of, it's not just, like, there should be some type of work involved. It shouldn't just be give everybody's tokens, because then they're just going to sell them. But some type of behavioral mining. So, for example, Fcoin is trade to mine, which there's problems because it's all bots. This is one of the biggest questions for game designers or tokenomics designers is you want to have behavioral mining that is not super easy to cheat on, which is a hugely difficult problem to solve, as any ex-gold farmer can tell you. But it's something that projects should be thinking about.
Jeff?
Yeah, what I think is important is actually designing the incentive mechanism to create some trigger, right? That's not just, like for example, in our pre-sale, right? Like you could send someone a link to Axie Infinity, and if and only if that person actually bought something from the pre-sale, did you receive a token in exchange? And that token was actually convertible into one of the rare classes of Axie that were actually from our pre-sale, right? So I think, yeah, I do agree with like the tokenomics and the incentive mechanism. I also believe in partnerships, right? Like at Axie Infinity, we don't want to build everything, have to do everything ourselves, right? Like we don't have the devs or the funding to build, for example, build our own scaling solution, build our own wallet, right? But what we do like to do is find the best teams, the best technology, the best communities behind different technological kind of breakthroughs, partner with them, and once you know there's an announcement, all the people in their community are like, oh, this game looks amazing, like let's go check it out, right? So when we started working with Loom Network, a lot of the new wallets that were coming into our game, I could see we're holding Loom token, right? Yeah. So I think stuff like that is, I think, the best way to approach user acquisition.
Did that answer your burning question? It's all doused now. All right, great. Any other questions from the audience? Nobody else? Going once, going twice, and I think we're done. All right, thank you so much, guys, for joining us on the panel today.
Thank you.